Yeah, my name is Maurice Makoloo. I come from Kenya, and I work for the Institute for Law and Environmental Governance, ILEG, which is an environmental organization in Kenya, as its director.
And tell us more about the work that your organization does.
We try to work on environmental governance, which is essentially ensuring that people have access to natural resources, and that those natural resources are appropriately managed, because our economic system relies on natural resources. And so we do training of judges, basically sensitization of judges and other judicial officers, so that they can understand the need to use law to properly secure those resources. We train lawyers because they are a crucial link and a partner for local communities in securing their rights. But we also train local communities because it is them whose rights could be violated. They need to know when they are violated and how they are violated and what to do when they are violated. We also do research on environmental law and policy, so that where there is no law and policy that can govern management of natural resources, then through our research we can propose certain ideas. But also based on those researches, we can suggest amendments to existing laws, or we could use those particular laws to advocate for better laws and regulations.
What would you say to these people who have never actually considered the human impact of environmental issues, or the connection between environmental issues and human rights? What would you say to someone?
All right. I would tell them that the environmental movement is about saving lives. It is about making provision for people, real people, getting real opportunity and real livelihoods. Because I grew up in a village and I saw forests being decimated, ostensibly to produce food. And I know that after producing food for a number of years, those lands are now barren and we have no forests. The rain patterns have changed, and that meant that the community is not receiving as much food from those lands as they used to. I grew up in the village. I saw certain types of cassava, which was a staple food where I grew from, disappear. And the moment that disappeared, in times of drought, because the cassava was very drought resistant, people could go hungry. I saw granaries disappear. These days there are no granaries in my village, where when I was growing up there were granaries. All because we have interfered very fundamentally with our environment. So don't tell me about environment being a very secondary. It is the real thing. All the stuff that we do, whether as politicians or professionals, is because we want to make sure that the environment is healthy. We might want to produce stuff and industry and all that, but if in the process we are killing communities, who is going to buy that stuff because the community is dead? Who is going to use the computer that we are making? Because we have not provided a safety net through which the community can use that product while still remain alive. In other words, we have not, and we must never forget to balance environmental management with economic development.
Is there a specific case or a story of a community or a specific case that you worked on that would illustrate this, that you'd like to talk about, like how the community was able to go to use legal recourse and legal policy to try and change some of the situations, particularly with corporations that are coming from outside Kenya?
Right. I mean, we have several examples. In one case where we were facing the prospect of mining of titanium in the coastal part of Kenya by a big corporation from Canada called Tiomin Resources Incorporated. And I'm told titanium is a very valued material, even in construction of aircrafts and all that. They signed a deal with the government, essentially. Very secret, and but for our part, it did not factor in local communities. And that was very sad, because even in terms of their compensation, they were seeking to lease the area at some point for less than $50 in a year. That was laughable. There was no provision for resettlement of the people that were being, whose lives are being disrupted. The social implications of such kind of process, and even the environmental implications, because the mining process was likely to cause some radiation because of the chemicals that were being used. So people were not considering that, and the government was running roughshod over people because of all this kind of stuff. And the civil society in Kenya joined hands with the local community, a section of the local community, and pushed through this. And as we speak, several years later, this project has not taken off because we are saying you cannot take off until you balance the interests of the communities with the interests of the corporation. What has happened anyway over the years is that the company has now proposed an increment in the compensation from the initial less than $50 a year to more than $1,000. It's still not adequate, but it just shows that with effort, with appropriate use of legislation and other tools that environmentalists are able to have, it is possible to better secure the interests of these communities. I mean, it also just shows that local communities also need to be vigilant. And that is why, as an environmental organization, we emphasize the need to create awareness within these local communities. Because we will not be there in the community all the time. But if they are vigilant, they are able to sound the alarms, and then people are able to run to their assistance. That's why we emphasize the training of lawyers, because if lawyers do not understand environmental implications of some of these processes, they are not able to appropriately talk to the judges, get the judges to understand what is at stake. Because as we say in law, some judgments are just as good as the submissions that the lawyers make. So if we are able to get the lawyers to make good submissions, then the judgment is going to be good. But at the same time, we need to sensitize the judges so that they understand, again, also what is at stake. Because you can't find a very good case with very enthusiastic local community members, a very well-educated lawyer in terms of environmental management. If the judge has no clue what is at stake, he probably is going to think about it in the same way that other people think it is a fancy subject about protection of whales and, that kind of stuff. So in that example that I've talked about, we were able to get the judgment that put the spin into all these things and triggered a lot of reaction by a judge issuing an injunction and saying that there is a law that requires environmental impact assessment and many other things, and it says that anybody can come before this court irrespective of whether they are personally injured or not. Now, that is the kind of protection we are talking about, and that illustrates the connectivity between governance generally and how people on the ground are able to live sound, healthy, and clean lives.
What inspires you to do this work, this type of work?
Yes, just the appreciation that environment is about life. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a village. I have seen the systems changing, the ecosystem changing, and sadly, the poverty that comes with the change in environment. I have seen big corporations, multinational corporations, invest in my country and in other countries, and instead of bringing boom, they bring gloom. And it is therefore imperative that those of us that have had the privilege of learning, of knowing when an invention has occurred instead of an invention, we take some action. And because I have also seen the joy of a local community that has won a battle against a local corporation or a multinational corporation or against government that had threatened its very existence, I know that I'm doing the right thing, and I get very happy.